Why can't APS just pay teachers
Can
more?
my child really learn in a classroom of 30?
Is public education as bad as the media and everyone else says it is?
Everyone has an opinion about Albuquerque Public Schools. But where do you go to sort out fact from fiction and rumor? Right here. Welcome to the APS Open Book Podcast with your host, Mark Goodrum.
Welcome to the APS Open Book Podcast, Episode 7, Water Samples in the APS. And we have our guest today, Scott Elder, back with us, Chief Operating Officer for APS. Thanks so much for coming back. I brought you something. Here's some water.
Oh, thank you.
We appreciate you coming back. We had you on the episode, couple of episodes back there on security.
Yeah, we talked about that, and it was a good time.
You wear several hats in the district.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually had to be introduced the other day, and they asked which departments that I have, and we listed them all out, and it's all the largest departments in the district. So
Wow.
There's a lot to do.
Yeah, it keeps you busy.
It's always interesting.
Well, let's dive right in, pardon the pun, but to the water. First of all, last spring, give or take, toward the end of the school year, APS, correct me if I'm wrong, went on and did some water sample testing, correct?
Yeah, it's basically what happened. So in effect, the state health department and the environmental department from the state offered an opportunity to school districts across the state to participate in water testing, and we accepted along with a couple other districts.
Yeah, and what was the thought process? Why did APS do that?
Well, actually, it's funny because it sort of ties into the security that we talked about last time. So we put student safety and staff safety at the forefront. You know, we
Sure.
need to create clean, healthy, safe environments for students to learn and staff to instruct. And part of that is what we put in our bodies. So we had an opportunity to check on our infrastructure, and we took advantage of it.
Right. Well, being proactive and moving in the right direction, and without having to, answer to, other people trying to get ahead of the game, I guess what I'm trying to say is the best way to tackle these problems.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the word we've used over and over and over again is proactive. Our maintenance and operations department really takes it seriously, trying to do the best job they can to keep our facilities as secure and as safe as possible and as clean as possible.
Sure.
And so when they had this opportunity offered to them to get this testing done by the state lab, they said sure. And, what you'll see throughout the entire process is that our department was always proactive. They took steps that they didn't necessarily have to take,
Right.
but they wanted to mitigate any risk or any concern immediately. So.
Was this the first time, or when was the last time the testing was done?
Actually, no. So we've been doing testing in the schools all along, and I don't know when the last time was. But whenever these opportunities arise, when the state lab or the environmental department or the health department offers an opportunity, APS has said yes.
Sure.
So there's been ongoing testing, and you see that again throughout the history. So basically what happened was in the late 80s, I think like 1988, the EPA changed regulations for construction and said you can't use certain types of materials and certainly in school buildings, but any type of building that could potentially expose people to lead.
Right.
And so the only buildings in APS that are impacted are those that were built prior to 1990.
Right.
So as an example of what APS has done throughout the years, in the mid-90s, APS was engaged in a very aggressive replacement of water fountains to drinking fountains, and because there was a brand that had a tendency to leach lead out of the brass, so they just replaced all of them.
Nice.
And it's been that kind of proactive approach that APS has taken, for a very long time, again with the concept of keeping the security or the facilities as clean as possible.
Yeah. When you mentioned that, it seems like I remember when getting the fountains replaced. A coming through Grant Middle School.
Sure. In I think in '96 I was at Highland and we had the very old fountains, and I have a vague remembrance. It's been a long time, but I do sort of remember that we got these nice new fountains, and everybody was really excited because they were clean and shiny, and it just felt kind of neat to get them.
And you see, that sort of goes to my thinking that when you're in the middle of all of this, when you're in this classroom, in the schools, and you have new lighting come in, and you're going through your day-to-day activities, you don't really know, and you don't hear about how we came to this. Why are they doing this? Oh, are they broken? Or we just needed new lights or whatever. Now, I do remember, and it's a little off topic here, but I do remember the energy savings program going on. But, I never thought anything about the fountains being replaced and just upgrading kind of thing.
Yeah, you see that a lot. We do upgrade the lights, and we've moved to some LEDs versus the fluorescent. And you look at our new school designs, you see the much greater emphasis on natural lighting. The schools were built in the 50s. You see the impact of the Cold War and that sort of solid brick structure. But as you get into the new structure, you're seeing much more natural lighting. And it's sort of the same thing with the fountains. You just don't really think that, they're doing this to make it look be nicer, be fresher, be new, and they are, and that's part of it. But there was also some thought behind it that particular brand, had some problems. So let's just get rid of all of them, and that's sort of been the process.
I had this question later down the list here, but I'm going to bring it up now, which leads me to, those bond elections and just the community supporting the schools to be upgraded. And we're doing this, APS is doing this without the help from the election last year.
Yeah, that's right. But this is sort of an ongoing process, like I said. So it's not something that just started in the last year. It's just it's part of the money that comes up in bonds, funds, maintenance. I'm glad you brought it up, because in November we're going back to the voters with a much smaller package that has no tax increase, very concise, and it allows the continuation of the maintenance money. So if people are really concerned about things like lead, leaching into the water, that's the money that pays to remediate that. And should this election November fail, that money goes away, and the district has to find it somewhere else. Well, there is no magic pot of money, so it comes from somewhere. Something gets cut to provide for that, and it would be very, very difficult.
And we were talking before we started recording that if you want to have and support our kids, our students, the children of Albuquerque, we do this at home. How many of us as parents open our pocketbook and open the wallet, and okay, let's buy them new shoes, and all of this. But we have to do it as a community.
Yeah, I mean, we all have an investment, and I think when you talk about maintenance dollars, you're talking about protecting an investment as much as anything. So, we have billions of dollars of money invested in the infrastructure. This protects it. It protects the children, first and foremost, protects the staff, the people doing the work there, and it protects the facilities.
Well, let's go in. I got a little bit off on a tangent there, but
it's a good tangent.
I wanted to make a point on how important this is to be supported by the community. So the results, talk about where we were when the results came in, and how it affected the moving forward during the summer.
Well, so what happened was because there was only a few districts that opted in, we were given an opportunity to do a lot of testing. So 69 elementary schools were selected, and we did about just a little under 900 tests. I think it was like 883 tests. Of each, so what that means is they go into a school and they'd maybe do 10 to 20 samples around the school, okay? Mostly classroom, sometimes in nurses' offices. The drinking fountains, I really want to emphasize this, the drinking fountains were not as big a concern because they'd all been replaced. So they don't have the fixtures. Probably the most important thing that people really need to understand is it's not the source water that's the issue. There is no problem with Albuquerque's water. It's perfectly safe.
Right.
It's what happens is sometimes in fixtures that have some brass in it, the water will sit, and if it sits long enough, there may be some leaching from the brass because lead is used in the creation of brass.
Right.
So what happens is when you turn the water on and you flush that stagnant water out, the lead's gone. So, really, the EPA really just says you could put in a program whereby you just have the teachers run the water for, say, 30 seconds to a minute to start the day,
Right.
and you've resolved the issue. There's no longer any concern. APS said, no, we're going to, that's like triaging.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not fixing the problem. Right. So we have those 880-something tests. 5% came back positive, that they had an issue. Some of them, were very, very, just a very small issue. Some were a little bit larger than others. So what we did was we just replaced all the fixtures immediately. You can wait for a second draw, but if we had a fixture that came up, say a sink and the faucet, and it came up that it was having an issue, we just replaced it.
Okay.
Because that's what you're going to do to remediate the problem, to really fix the problem. Running the water is great; it triages it, but it doesn't resolve the root cause, which
Right.
is the brass leaching.
Right.
So basically, replace that. Then you do a second round of tests. All right, and out of that second round of tests, I think about 33 came back as a problem. And I said, okay, we have to go further. And this is where the people who really know what they're doing are really useful. So they do a series of draws, okay? So you think about it, the pipe has water and it's just sitting, right?
Yeah.
So they take the first 250 milliliters and that tells them how far back in the pipe they went. Then they take another 250 milliliters and that's their second draw. And then they go back and take a third draw. And then they can compare each of those draws and it tells them very precisely where the issue is. And so once we know we have to go in 2 feet, or we have to go in 4 feet, then we can go in
That's pretty
distance.
amazing.
Actually, it's a pretty cool science. Yeah, I didn't really understand that when we first started describing it, but I learned a lot in this job.
Yeah.
It's a journey of discovery oftentimes.
Right.
But
Future career. For
right,
you.
yeah, but it was interesting, and it allows us to go back, and then we continue to test and draw until it comes clean. I think at last check, and it's been a couple weeks, we were down to 9 fixtures that we were still remediating. But in the interim, and this is really important, we turned those off. So we either bagged them with a bag that said water tested in progress, do not use, or we just turned the water off. We had one school that self-selected to remove a number. They had, we have some issues in these classrooms. We don't really need those fixtures, so let's just cap them.
Right.
So those are gone. They can't even be used anymore. But we still replaced pipes and fixtures all the way through.
And these were all the schools in APS, or
No,
how did you-
69 elementaries. So that was
Right.
the grant initially focused on elementary.
Okay.
We have an opportunity coming up in the fall to continue as there's been some more interest. The state has released more money, and so we'll move into the middle schools and then ultimately the high schools.
Okay. Yeah.
But again, it's only the buildings pre-1990.
Right.
And that, you're going back to the bond issue. People may not realize that, but when we rebuild facilities, we take out a lot of the issues that might potentially exist.
Right.
So all these new facilities that we paid for, there's no concern there.
Exactly.
You don't have to worry about it in those facilities.
Right. Well, for example, like a Del Norte High School.
Del Norte High School is a
That's-
great example.
I mean, it's relatively new, but
Their
when
main
was it
building
built?
is
I
in-
can't remember the main
Oh,
building.
it hasn't been 10
10
years,
years?
I don't think.
Yeah.
No, certainly after
On the other hand,
1990.
Manzano, the band room area, or the new building that just went up last year or 2 years ago, whenever they finished.
Yeah, we opened up last year.
Yeah, so that's all.
So there's, and some of the schools we build in phases. To build a new high school is really over $125 million. So we're not, we very rarely rebuild an entire school, although we did a huge chunk of Del Norte. So we like the Volcano Vista, Atrisco Heritage, those were around $125 million facilities.
Right. So the middle schools are the next. There was a saying, and staying on topic, but there was a saying when I was teaching. We felt like when we were in middle school, the stepchild, because it was that high schools were here, elementaries were always hit, and in middle school, well, we'll get around to it when we can. But we're looking at the middle school next for trying to take care of the water issues there, or has it already been done?
No, that's towards the fall. We're waiting for the money to become available.
Right.
And once the state lab is available to do the testing, that's probably the biggest component is having the lab available. So, and they, we did 880 tests, and it's not like you just wave it under a light, I guess. I don't know. I really don't know how they do the testing, but apparently it's somewhat complex. And they said they can do I thought they said they could do 40 a day. Okay.
Wow.
So you think about the time it takes when you're doing, 20 tests at a school. It takes a while to work through it, and we had so many. But yeah, we're going to move into the middle schools next and just keep working our way through it.
And as you were saying that, some of these schools, I'm looking at Polk, Harrison, that have been around for a while.
But those are good examples. So Polk, for example, is on a well.
Okay.
And again, the source water is not the issue, but we've actually gone into a couple of those schools and replaced a lot of the piping already. And with that, we just replaced the fixtures because we don't do, there are no lead line pipes, so that's not the issue anymore. Really comes out of those brass
fittings.
And at this point, it's mostly brass fittings.
Right.
So they're fairly small, but still you want to address it if it's a concern.
Sure. And this is good information for the parents to hear, and it's not something you got to hear, on the news all the time or at a meeting, but it's a peace of mind to know when your child goes in here to the schools that it's being addressed.
Yeah. So actually, that's a good point, because one thing we do, we come back from summer is sometimes the water seems a little brown to people, and that's because of the galvanized steel. And that's not lead. You can't see lead. You can't smell lead. That's what makes it a little bit nervous for people. So we'll go and do a flush of the entire school. We will go in and flush all the sinks. We'll flush the toilets. We'll flush all that water and push a lot of that water. It's sat stagnant. So when the kids start the year, it's already been significantly flushed. I also would remind people that this really could happen in your own home as well. If you're in an older home, you haven't replaced some of your fixtures. Right. I remember back in the 70s when I was a kid, we're told to run your water for a little while, before you took a glass out. Right. If you're nervous, just run the water for 30 seconds and you've pushed the problem out. Yeah. I mean, even in these places where we found it, it's really important to remember that as soon as those fixtures ran, you were pushing the concern out, and within 30 seconds to a minute, it was all removed.
Right. And we know about the lead with the younger children in elementary school, but that played in the role of starting with the elementary schools for the most part?
Probably. I guess I'm hesitant to say just that. I mean, I think you want to protect your most vulnerable populations, the ones who are least likely to know to run water and to think about that. I think it was partly the focus of the grant from the environmental department.
I'd like to touch upon that grant. So I think you mentioned that's going to be available again this year?
Yes.
The money?
Money will be available for more testing, yes.
Okay. And so if I'm someone that's voting, then why do I need to besides all the other upgrades of APS, that particular part I don't have to worry about. Maybe I don't need to vote,
Well, unfortunately, that's not exactly true. So whereas somebody is paying for the testing, they're not paying for the fixtures.
Right.
So that's where the taxpayer dollar gets applied. Okay. So if we do find an issue, we have to fix it. Like I said, we can continue to triage problems and just run water. Well, I don't know. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I think just running water endlessly is not exactly the most environmentally friendly idea.
Right.
And so you want to remediate the problem. You want to fix it. Yeah. So that means replacement of fixtures, and in some cases, we have to go all the way down to an angle joint.
Right.
and replace that. So
Yeah. You stirred a thought. I remember at Grant when I was the band director there, the gym area, they had the showers removed and they tore up that whole area there. I don't know, back in your day and my day, when during gym class and everybody had to go and take a shower and do all of that. I couldn't, I just was just so crazy to see how old those fixtures were, and it was a breath of fresh air to see them being removed and redone there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it takes time and money and so forth.
yeah, those projects are not easy.
Yeah.
The older, some of that older construction was done very, very well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And they built it to last,
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of work to get it out.
Absolutely.
And you want to do it you want to minimize the impact on the school. You want to minimize.
I heard the
impact on the
jackhammering going on.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do. That's right. You can't
Right,
put a muffler on a
Right.
on a jackhammer.
Yeah. All right, so now goodness gracious, we were talking today that school is starting for some of the students already, and then next week. So talk to the parents about moving forward with APS, about the water in the elementary school. It's safe,
Yeah, it's safe.
and you don't have to worry about it.
You do not have to worry about it.
Right.
The testing ongoing. Again, we're not just triaging the problem; we're fixing it, and that was part of being proactive and trying to get ahead of the situation.
Right.
We had some schools that had more hits than others, so in some cases, we went even beyond the areas that were tested. We said, you know what, we had enough hits here. Let's just replace all the fixtures.
Right.
Let's just do the whole school.
Yeah.
And that was done partly to alleviate concern, and because I understand why people would be concerned. It sounds scary,
Right,
but I need to
right.
remind people that there was no incident
Yeah.
that drove this. There was nothing happened that made people go, "Hey, we really
Right.
need to test." It was part of a proactive state movement that they're trying to do across the state, and APS participated.
Right.
And then took the additional steps of remediating the issue to get ahead of things.
Right, right. And you coming today and us talking about this is not to get in front of a problem. It's just being transparent, to use an overused word there, that let the community know that we're on top of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word to use, actually, because we want people to know about this. We want people to know the results. So actually, as we complete it, and we're getting, like I said, we're down to just a couple more, we've been placing the results on the website.
Okay.
And we will also place a hard copy at each school so that parents can go in and actually look at the results and see, okay, it started at this amount and then they fixed it.
Right.
And now you see from the testing it's addressed.
Sure.
So they can see the results. And sometimes we had to, like I said, it didn't always remediate itself on the first one. Most of them did.
Yeah.
Most of them remediated themselves after the first adjustment. But when it didn't, we just kept going.
Right.
And we just went further into the wall until we got to where the problem was.
Right. You stole one of my questions already, and that is for parents that are listening to this, if I want more information, where do I go?
In terms of more information, what do you
On the
I mean, if they want to
results.
if they're just
Yeah.
interested in the results themselves, they'll be at the school or they'll be online.
Yeah.
And we'll have those posted. And it's, it's just numbers, but it'll show you that the numbers go down.
Sure.
So that your problem is addressed. And again, if you don't have computer access or you just really want to see it in a hard copy, that will be available at the school as well.
Yeah, call the school.
And if they wanted more information, the State Environmental Department, the New Mexico Environmental Department, and the Department of Health have really great resources and great explanations of what the testing is about, because it's not just a school issue, it's a community issue.
Sure.
And I've really appreciated those people that have pointed that out. Like I said, this could happen in any building built prior to 1990 that hasn't engaged in an active testing.
Right.
And it's not the source water, it's the fixtures.
Very good point to put out there. It's not the source water, and also at our homes, replace the fixtures, just like you would take care of any other problem in your house.
Right. Yeah, and there's older homes, older neighborhoods, and I think most people have done it. But if you haven't, it's something to consider. And they do offer a home testing program, and they tell you exactly how to do it. And it's remarkably similar to what we're doing. But this was what did someone say? Said it wasn't a crisis.
Sure.
But it's always a concern.
You're getting ahead of it.
You want to keep people safe,
Right.
and that's the environmental department, the health department. They're doing their jobs. We're participating in their program.
There you go. I hope that you coming on today and the past episode on security opens the eyes for the community, because to see what's happening before the crisis, and then there isn't a crisis.
Yeah.
Because if there isn't a problem, then you're unsung heroes, in other words, and that's important for the audience to see what's going on behind the scenes.
Thank you. I think the guys down at the maintenance and operations department really take this stuff very seriously.
Absolutely.
And so when the possibility came up, they jumped on it, and again, they took it further than they needed to, because they were just thinking, how do we keep our people safe?
I've seen those guys in the schools working, and believe me, first of all, I wouldn't want their job. A friend of mine actually had his two daughters in my band. Mr. Sandoval was with maintenance and operations, and coming in when there's a drain clogged up and having to deal with it's not an easy. What was that TV show?
Dirty
Dirty
Jobs.
Job.
Yeah, Dirty Jobs.
It's rough.
Yeah, it is, but it's really important work, and it's unfortunate, and this is a completely different topic, and I apologize, but we really do face a crisis in the state. We need more people who are able to do that kind of work,
Absolutely.
who have the skills and the training, and just getting one of those certificates is tough.
Right.
So I think it's often sort of demonized as, that's a type of work for only some people, but it's honorable.
Absolutely.
And what these guys are doing really makes an impact in the lives of other people.
Absolutely.
And I would encourage people to consider the careers, and I'd certainly encourage them to apply with APS, but
right.
we have a great benefits package. So,
Yeah.
but they take it very seriously, which I appreciate. It's their job, and it's their vocation, and they look at it that way.
They need to get all the kudos they can get.
I agree.
Because it's a job I couldn't do, wouldn't want to do, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I remember trying to take out the U-trap
Yep.
when I did plumbing at home, and how much I
Right.
struggled with that. The
Right.
idea of doing all this other work is
Yeah.
kind of intimidating.
Right, electrical and all of that for all the kids. So, anyway, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and shedding a light on this and bringing it to the attention of the community. So I appreciate it. And second time coming in, so you're doing double duty. We'll put a little extra in your paycheck if we.
I like to hear that. But, no, I love coming on, and I appreciate the opportunity to tell our story.
Sure.
And I'm sure I'll be back.
Yeah, absolutely. And we thank KA&W for allowing us this time, and the media office of APS, communications office, I should say, helping us get through all of this. Come back next month. We'll have another episode for the APS Open Book Podcast. Until then, take care and always keep smiling.
This podcast is produced by Albuquerque Public Schools and KA&W Public Radio. Special thanks to KA&W Program Director Kevin Otero. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversation in the months ahead.